task for this morning is to give a short lecture. Hopefully, you'll be able to come up with questions, and hopefully this will elicit interest among our audience members. So, if Sir Kervin talked about the highly political aspect of the Marcos regime, particularly his constitutional authoritarianism, I'd like to talk about perhaps one of the most important consequences of the Marcos regime, especially in the 70s and also in the 80s. Just a quick disclaimer: this is really not my cup of tea. I'm a historian who specializes in Spanish colonial Philippines, and I think this is one of the rare times that I will deliver something about the Marcos regime. The reason for this is because I was able to engage myself in a publication project several years ago about the Marcos regime. And that project is called Some Are Smarter Than Others. So I was invited by the Manapat family in 2018 to edit and annotate this 1991 book. Mas gurang pa sa kuya ining libro. 1990 or 1991. I was born in 1992. So, mas gurang pa sa kuya ining librong inedit sa inannotate ko. But nevertheless, I was invited by the family to work on this one, no? And this is my most extensive experience of working on something that's related to the Marcos dictatorship. So as you can see on your screens, this is the cover of the book of the 2020 edition of the Some Are Smarter Than Others. We call it SASTO. That's the acronym for the book, no? Some Are Smarter Than Others. It actually started as a pamphlet in 1979, and it was originally called The Octopus. That's why it has an octopus somewhere there in the cover. The octopus because it refers to Marcos and his cronies. And Ricardo Manapat's pamphlet in 79 initially documented the cronyism that was going on in the Philippines at that time. But of course, the term cronyism was not yet in vogue. It was not yet introduced by journalists. As a matter of fact, I researched on the origin of the term, and it was apparently used by a journalist in Time magazine in 1980 to refer to the economic affairs in the Philippines under Marcos. In other words, kita ang nagpabisto kan konsepto kan crony capitalism sa kinaban. We are the ones who introduced the concept of crony capitalism or cronyism to the world, as described, of course, by a journalist in the United States. And then, of course, later on, Ricardo Manapat adopted the term when he came up with an expanded version of the octopus. It came out as this book. It's actually very voluminous, around 500, 600 pages worth of expose about the cronyism during the martial law or even the Marcos dictatorship, not just during the martial law, but even before Marcos declared martial law. So very interesting because he talks about not only the cronies of Marcos, but how a few families were able to amass wealth, and also how it compromised and impoverished millions of families as well in the Philippines. So my talk for this morning is titled Export-Led Industrialization Turned Crony Capitalism: How Ferdinand Marcos Co-opted Salvador Araneta's Economic Vision. Now, what I will try to do here is to try and connect the Third Republic with the Marcos dictatorship. After all, Marcos was the last president of the Third Republic, of course, before he declared martial law in 1972. So I will try to see how Marcos was working on the sidelines in the 1950s and how he was looking at the debates that were going on when it comes to the economic policies. Perhaps what the question that the economic advisors were trying to grapple was how should we address a sputtering economy after the war? Kakatapos lang ng World War II, and the Philippines was experiencing recession in the 1950s. So the prevailing question in terms of the economy is that how should we address an economy that's in recession? Should we expand or should we contract? So What I'd like to do first is to talk about Salvador Araneta. So I prepared here a short paper to guide my presentation, and what I'll be showing you are photographs. Hopefully, it will elicit more interest on the subject as you see these photographs. So I'd like to begin with Salvador Araneta. On 22nd July 1954, the economist and then Secretary of Agriculture and Natural Resources, Salvador Zaragoza Araneta, addressed the Rotary Club of Manila on the central bank's austere foreign exchange policy. An advocate of Keynesian economics, Araneta articulated in the symposium one of his three most salient advocacies through the Great Debate with Central Bank Governor Miguel Cuaderno. That is the deliberate devaluation of the Philippine peso. Wary of an import-dependent economy, he argued that the overvaluation of the peso is detrimental to the country's exports. The 2 pesos to $1 exchange rate, which the central bank so compulsively maintained from 1945 to 1959, was in fact, quote, a concealed and sly subsidy on consumption of imported goods and a concealed and pernicious penalty on local production. Depreciating the currency, hence, will incentivize exporters to produce more, but will also create domestic job opportunities. Meron tayong impression, di ba, na kapag mas malakas yung piso, feeling natin mas malakas yung ekonomiya. But during this time, Salvador Araneta sees the wisdom in deliberately devaluing the peso. Gusto sabihin, pababain natin yung halaga ng piso kontra dolyar. Later on, I will explain why. Another advocacy Araneta articulated through the Great Debate was target spending, where the state finances certain sectors of the economy to boost its production. At a time when austere economic policies were more prevalent, Araneta called for a Filipino New Deal, an idea taken after Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal in the United States, and of course from the economic theories of John Maynard Keynes, a British economist. In this proposal, he urged the government to infuse capital into the sputtering economy and finance the agricultural and industrial sectors, albeit at a deficit, to boost their production. Novel and revolutionary, Araneta's liberal articulations may have been the spirit of economic decolonization, nationalism, and conservatism that pervaded the post-colony in the 1950s proved too much to overcome. This is a photograph of Miguel Cuaderno Sr. He was Finance Secretary of the Rojas administration, and he was also appointed the first governor of the central bank from 1949 to 1960. So meron siyang tinatawag noon na inflation rhetoric, no? Kumbaga tinatakot niya yung mga tao sa inflation kasi sino naman hindi matatakot sa inflation, di ba? Na pag tumaas yung presyo, it's necessarily bad for the economy, it's necessarily bad for the laborers, lalong-lalo na yung mga arawan, yung mga sweldo, di ba? Meron din siyang tinatawag na economic populism, no? Economic populism at nag-resonate ito sa mga policies ng central bank. While Araneta's advocacies remained mere theories. Until 1959, the central bank maintained currency controls and kept the strength of the peso and the 2-to-1 peso-dollar exchange. It was not until the administration of Diosdado Macapagal that the peso started to depreciate. Actually, for 10 or 11 years, parang 2:1 yung ating exchange rate with the dollar, no? So, pakiramdam natin nun, malakas yung ekonomiya ng Pilipinas. Pero sinasabi ni Salvador Araneta that strength of the peso is actually something that discourage domestic producers to produce for export, no? Dahil mas binibigyan ito ng importansya actually yung imports kasi mura nating nabibili halimbawa yung mga imported goods sa Amerika, no? Syempre umiiral din minsan yung colonial mentality natin, so we'd rather support the imported rather than the domestic. So let me just go to the slide real quick. so that you get a sense of Araneta's salient ideas. So there were three that I mentioned in the first three paragraphs of my paper. So the first one is currency devaluation. He wanted to deliberately devalue the peso, to weaken the peso against the dollar, because it was his proposed response to the strong peso from 1949 to 1960. Gusto ni Araneta na pababain natin yung halaga ng piso, no? Katulad na lamang nung yen, yung Japanese yen. I-research nyo na lang, i-google nyo na lang kung magkano yung exchange rate. Pero kung hindi ako nagkakamali, yung 1 peso natin ay equivalent sa 0.37 yen. Diba? So, hindi ba kayo nagtataka bakit mahina yung pera ng Japan pero mas malakas yung ekonomiya natin ng Japan kaysa sa ekonomiya natin, di ba? So, sinasabi ni Araneta na this was precisely Japan, Korea, and even Singapore's strategy that brought their economy to new heights. Kaya lumakas yung ekonomiya nila post-war, it's because of the devaluing of their peso or their currency. May kinalaman yan dito sa pangalawa, no? Pangalawang idea, and that is the export-led industrialization. So it is also a response of Araneta to the import-dependent Philippine economy in the 1950s. Obviously, hindi maganda yung import kasi kung naalala niyo yung formula ng gross domestic product, yung GDP, di ba, sinosubtract yung imports. Gusto sabihin, kabawasan yan sa kita ng Pilipinas or sa ekonomiya ng Pilipinas at the end of a year. Di ba? So, ayaw ni Araneta na maging import dependent tayo. So, yung proposal niya ay magkaroon tayo ng industrialization that's meant for exports. Right? So, to be able to encourage that, kailangan yung peso natin ay mahina laban sa dolyar. Siguro tataka, sir, bakit kailangan mahina? Or paano mag-work yun na mahina yung peso natin and yet malakas yung exports natin? So I'll give you an example. So halimbawa, si Sir Marjun halimbawa ay exporter ng abaka. No? Yun yung isa sa mga primary produce ng partido, di ba, nung Spanish colonial period. Halimbawa lang. So halimbawa si Marjun ay exporter ng abaka. Sabihin natin na ang exchange rate ay 2 pesos is to $1. 2 pesos is to $1. Pag nagbenta si Marjun ng isang, sabihin na, ano bang unit of measure? Isang pikul, P-I-C-U-L, no? Yan yung unit of measure noon ng abaka. 1 pikul ng abaka worth $1, 2 pesos lang yung babalik kay Marjun. Di ba? Whereas, kapag binabaan natin yung halaga ng piso, sabihin natin $1 is to 10 peso, yun yung exchange rate natin. Pag nagbenta si Marjun sa Amerika ng abaka, yung babalik sa kanya ay 10 pesos. Okay? So sana nakikita natin yung relationship ng currency devaluation sa export-led industrialization. Di ba? Kaya sinasabi kanina ni Araneta na yung malakas na piso, hindi siya necessarily nagtatranslate sa malakas na ekonomiya. Okay? Nagtatranslate siya actually sa import-dependent economy ng Pilipinas. So mas nagiging import-dependent tayo rather than nagiging export-led yung ating ekonomiya. Right? And finally, meron siyang tinatawag na target government spending. So, kung maaalala niyo yung economics ninyo, economics classes from high school and even from first year college, di ko alam kung may economics pa ngayon sa college, ano? Meron tinatawag na fiscal policy. Diba? Yung fiscal policy, ito yung adjustments na ginagawa ng gobyerno in terms of spending, in terms of taxation, to respond to the economic situation. So halimbawa, nung 1950s, kagagaling lang ng Pilipinas sa gera. So definitely we were experiencing recession to the point of depression actually in the 1950s. So what was the best way of dealing with an economic recession? Yun yung tanong ni Araneta at ni Cuaderno. Yun yung sinasagot nila doon sa Great Debate. Yung sagot ni Miguel Cuaderno, kailangan natin magtipid. We have to be austere, no? Kailangan nating i-control yung spending ng government, kailangan nating taasan yung buwis, yung taxes, kailangan nating taasan yung interest rates para yung monetary policy na yun, no? Kailangan nating taasan yung interest rates para ma-discourage yung mga tao na bumili, no, or mag-loan or yun, mag-sign up for a long-term investment or long-term liability, let alone. So, target government spending, yung pangatlong salient idea ni Araneta, no? Kailangan gastusan ng gobyerno yung agriculture, yung industries, pati yung infra projects para lumago muli yung isang economy that's in recession. Let me repeat, no? Expansionary fiscal policy yung tugon ni Araneta this time, no? Kung si Cuaderno ay austerity, magtipid tayong lahat, si Araneta naman gumastos tayo, baliktad. He wanted to pursue an expansionary fiscal and even an expansionary monetary policy as a response to the economic recession in the 1950s. So these are the three important ideas that Araneta proposed when he was secretary of Ramon Magsaysay in the 1950s. If I'm not mistaken, he resigned from the cabinet of Magsaysay. And I think hindi na siya ulit nag-secretary kasi hindi naman siya pinapakinggan. Mas pinapakinggan si Miguel Cuaderno, no, in the 1950s. Kaya nga siya naging governor until 1960, if I'm not mistaken. Right? So let me go back to my script here. Araneta's ideas were so radical that they sounded absurd to the conservative 1950s. But if there's anyone in his time who prudently heeded his economic vision and adopted them in his policies, albeit perversely, it was, guess who? Ferdinand Edrelin Marcos, who through the 1950s was second district representative of Ilocos Norte. He was representative of the said province from 1949 to 1959. Sabi ni Leloy Claudio, who's my former professor and a good friend of mine, ironically, it was Marcos, the man responsible for Araneta's exile, who implemented Araneta's vision. Nobody understood the wisdom in Araneta's ideas better than Marcos. Punta tayo sa next slide. He and his technocrats loosened currency controls and allowed the peso to depreciate. From 1965 to 1969, in other words, the first term of Ferdinand Sr., the average peso-dollar exchange rate was now 3.91 pesos is to $1. The peso depreciated further to 6.67 for every dollar in 1972, the year Marcos placed the Philippines under martial rule. The concerted effort by the administration to devalue the peso was directed at boosting the country's exports to hasten economic growth, a model known as export-oriented industrialization. These measures were in consonance to the Investment Incentives Act, which Marcos lobbied to Congress and signed into law in 1967. This is 5 years before martial law. The law aimed to accelerate economic development, to develop the agricultural and manufacturing industries, to increase exports and employment opportunities. So nakita na natin kung paano inimplement ni Marcos sa kanyang mga pre-martial law policies yung vision ni Araneta, di ba? Nakita na natin yung currency depreciation or currency devaluation. Nakita rin natin yung export-oriented industrialization or EOI. At makikita rin natin yung target spending in the next paragraph, right? So, in theory, Marcos's export-oriented industrialization and the currency devaluation were the most appropriate measures to boost a sputtering, import-dependent Philippine economy in the 1950s and even in the 1960s. After all, this was the model responsible for the so-called East Asian miracle that made it possible for Japan and South Korea to soar to the world's top economy. So nakita ni Marcos yung halaga ng ideas ni Salvador Araneta. Nakita niya rin kung paano ito translate into policy ng Japan, no, at ng South Korea. Now, if I may give some concrete examples about Japan and South Korea, how are they able to do it? No? So the Japanese state was able to fund their superstar exporters, superstar producers. In the case of Japan, I think ang binigyan nila ng priority sa target spending ay yung automobiles, di ba? Kaya yung Toyota, yung Honda, Subaru, Kawasaki, di ba? Saka yung mga electronics. Kaya tayo may Sony, meron tayong ano ba yung mga Japanese, no? So ito yung mga halimbawa ng mga corporations na tinarget talaga ng Japanese state ng 50s at 60s, automobiles and corporations. Tapos tinulungan din ng Korea in the same way, tinulungan ng South Korea yung kanilang mga pareho, no, yung mga automobile and mga electronic corporations like Samsung, Hyundai, Daewoo, no. Ito yung mga superstar exporters. And as you can see right now, malayo na yung narating ng mga produkto ng Japan at ng Korea, especially the electronics and also the cars. I think sa Amerika halimbawa, yung Kia, no, nakikipagsabayan yung Kia, that's Korean, no? Nakikipagsabayan yung Kia sa mga American brands. Mas binibili pa nga siya ng mga Amerikano kaysa sa mga American cars kasi mas mura siya, no? It's cheaper, but at the same time malaki yung balik sa Japan at malaki rin yung balik sa Korea, precisely because mababa yung halaga ng kanilang currency. Won, if I'm not mistaken, sa Korea at yen sa Japan. So pareho yun mababa yung exchange rates kontra dolyar. And they were able to effectively implement this because they were able to effectively implement the export-oriented industrialization policy, right? So, in the Philippines, contrary to the promise of Marcos, the execution of the EOI or the export-oriented industrialization went errantly. So I'd like to show you the picture that I showed in my cover slide. This is a photograph of Ferdinand Marcos. And the Banana King, the one to the right, yung malapit sa saging, that's Antonio Floirendo. No? As a matter of fact, my descendant pa si Floirendo, I think apo na ito, if I'm not mistaken. Si Tony Boy Floirendo Lagdameo, na special presidential assistant ngayon ni Bongbong Marcos. No? So, siya ba yung asawa ni Margie Moran? Siya yata yung asawa ni Margie Moran, ano? Or I'm not sure, but Margie Moran is related to this family by marriage. So, the Floirendos. I think anak ni Antonio Floirendo yung napangasawa ni Margie Moran. Miss Universe, 1973. Okay. So, siya yung kinikilalang Banana King kasi binigay sa kanya ni Marcos yung industriya ng saging sa Pilipinas. So, eto na si Marcos, ano, nag-identify na rin siya ng mga top exports natin, yung mga produkto ng Pilipinas. And as you can surmise, many of these are agricultural products like banana, sugar, tobacco. Now, these were the top exports that we had actually during the American colonial period and even during the Spanish colonial period. So, instead of financing the country's flagship export industries, which could have potentially spurred economic development, Marcos infused state fund onto the business interests of his allies, friends, in-laws, and even his relatives. So dito sumablay si Marcos. Maganda sana yung idea. Nakita niya sana yung brilliance ni Araneta dun sa kanyang proposal. And Marcos was intelligent enough to see that it was the best way to address an import-dependent Philippine economy in the 50s and 60s. No? So, maganda sana. Meron sana siyang magandang idea, hindi lang maganda yung execution. So, sabi dito, these were usually in the form of government contracts, concessions, or behest loans. He used the state apparatus to reward appointed positions to his most loyal cohorts and place them in charge of the country's principal export products like sugar, banana, tobacco, and coconut. Mamaya, malalaman natin kung sino yung inassign niya sa coconut. Marcos made use of the presidential decrees and letters of instruction to directly, albeit legally, intervene in these industries, grant privileges, or tax exemptions to his cronies. So ito na yung sinasabi ni Sir Kervin kanina, no, na ginamit ni Marcos yung mga yung provisions ng batas ng Constitution para ma-legalize yung ilang mga bagay na gusto niyang gawing legit, di ba? So, katulad na lamang ng crony capitalism. So, halimbawa, nung inabot niya yung banana kay Floirendo, he wrote a presidential decree, di ba? Di ba? Assigning the banana industry to Floirendo's TADECO, yung Tagum Agricultural Development Corporation, TADECO. No? So, Monopolies were created as a result. The sugar industry, for instance, was handed to Roberto Benedicto, his frat brother from UP, whom he appointed as chairman of the Philippine Sugar Commission, or PhilSucom, and later the National Sugar Trading Corporation, or NASUTRA. Meron ding mga interest si Roberto Benedicto pagdating sa media, sa mass media. If I'm not mistaken, nung sinequester yung ABS-CBN ng mga Lopez, I think inabot ito kay Benedicto and one of the Romualdez brothers, no, kapatid ni Imelda. At yun, pinaghati-hatian nila. Dito nabuo yung mga channels na Banahaw Broadcasting. Nandyan din yung RPN, di ba? Saka yung IBC 13, RPN 9 and IBC 13. So, dito nabuo yon at dahil yon sa pagbigay ng media interests kay Benedicto, no, pati na rin kay Romualdez. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's Kokoy Romualdez na nakipaghatian sa ABS-CBN, or at least what's left of it. By virtue of Presidential Decree 388 signed on 2nd of February 1974, Marcos outlined PhilSucom's functions and powers, which created a monopoly over the sugar industry. Similarly, the banana industry was handed to Antonio Floirendo, the one you see in the picture, who was appointed president of the Tagum Agricultural Development Corporation, or TADECO, tobacco to Herminio Dicini, the Philippine Tobacco Filters Corporation as well, and coconut to guess who, Juan Ponce Enrile and Danding Cojuangco, who both reap the benefits from the Coco Levy Fund through the Philippine Coconut Authority, or the PhilCoA. Malapit lang dito sa amin yung opisina ng PhilCoA, no? Philippine Coconut Authority. Hindi ko alam kung maaalala niyo pa yung UCPB, yung bangko, United Coconut Planters Bank. That was actually an offshoot, no, of the Coco Levy Fund. Sinimulan ni na Enrile yung UCPB galing doon sa Coco Levy Fund. Yun yung taxes na binayad ng mga coconut farmers sa Pilipinas, no? At mula doon sa fund na yon, mula doon sa pera na yon, nagbukas sila ng bangko. At yun na nga yung naging UCPB, no? Pero ngayon, inabsorb na siya ng land bank. Binili na siya, state fund na naman, ano? Binili na siya ng land bank at nasa government na yung UCPB ngayon. Kinolapse na siya actually, nag-merge na siya with land bank. I think that was two years ago, if I'm not mistaken, 2022 or 2021, right? So, unlike the previous administrations and Justice Araneta proposed, Marcos broke with the conservative fiscal and monetary policy tradition of the previous administrations to accelerate economic growth. So yung mga previous presidents, sina Garcia, Magsaysay, even si Elpidio Quirino, no, austere yung kanilang monetary and fiscal policy. Pero si Marcos, nakinig siya kay Salvador Araneta. No? He wanted it to be an expansionary kind of policy. Gusto niyang gumastos para sa mga proyekto. At ginawa niya talaga yun, no? Even during his first term. So, he pursued fiscal and monetary policies that are highly expansionary. Gusto sabihin, gumastos siya, binabaan niya yung interest rates sa mga bangko, in-encourage yung mga tao na gumastos para mas stimulate yung economy. Sabi ni Araneta, that was actually the perfect way to address a weak economy or an economy in shambles after the war. Patricio Abinales and Donna Amoroso fairly acknowledged some of the projects Marcos financed during his first term, such as the subsidy for the so-called Green Revolution that built irrigation systems and purchased crops and chemical input, and the credit pumped into rural economies through the state-owned banks like PNB. Marcos also funded the construction of highway systems, most notably the Manila North and South Expressway, or segments of what is now the NLEX, the North Luzon Expressway, and SLEX, South Luzon Expressway, which were completed in 1968 and 1969, respectively. Many of these projects, however, were not constructed without awarding contracts to favored individuals. The Manila North and South Expressway contracts, for example, were awarded to his golfing partner Rodolfo Cuenca, and his company, the Construction and Development Corporation of the Philippines, or the CDCP. No? Here's a picture of Marcos playing golf. Marami sa mga golfing buddies niya ay yung kanyang mga cronies din. No? Isa na doon si Rodolfo Cuenca, yung may-ari ng CDCP. So, parang ngayon lang din yan, ano? Halimbawa yung expressways natin, hindi naman talaga siya government funded, pero ina-award ng government yung contract sa isang kumpanya. So halimbawa, dito sa Metro Manila, sa Mega Manila, no, yung mga expressways natin ay ina-award either kay Ramon Ang, San Miguel Corporation, or kay Manny Pangilinan, no, yung NLEX Corporation. Diba? So, pag may mga expressway na ginagawa dito, tanungin nyo, sino gumawa niyan? Ramon Ang or Manny Pangilinan? Saan natin makikita yung rivalry na yon other than the construction of our mega highways? Makikita natin sa PBA, di ba? Yung mga team sa PBA, Pangilinan versus Ramon Ang lang din yung naglalaban. So you have Ginebra, San Miguel on one hand, and then you have Meralco, NLEX on the other. Di ba? So very interesting. It's the same, it's a few people who are controlling the economy. And I think the framework that Marcos introduced during the 70s, even during the 60s, was the one that led to that. No? Hindi na siya actually nagbago or nawala. Siguro nag-lay low siya ng konti, pero hindi naman siya nawala talaga completely, yung cronyism na meron tayo. So, sige, let's proceed. So, to Marcos's credit, no? Bigyan natin ng credit si Marcos, no? Kasi maganda naman talaga yung ginawa niya, and it translated to economic growth. Maganda in a sense na he responded accordingly. Tama yung kanyang response doon sa recession, di ba? Gumastos. It translated into economic growth. In 1973, for instance, the annual growth of the gross domestic product was at 8.9% and was at 8.8% in 1976. Growth rates which are hitherto unparalleled. Hindi pa napapantayan yung ganong economic growth. Ito yung dahilan kung bakit maraming Marcos apologists ang nagsasabi na golden years daw ng golden years daw ng Philippine economy, yung Marcos regime noong 1970s. At lagi nilang ginagamit na justification for that argument is the unparalleled gross domestic product that we experienced in the 1970s. But to argue that the Marcos regime is the golden years of Philippine economy solely based on the country's GDP growth is not only hyperbolic, but a hasty generalization. It's in fact a form of historical distortion. Contrary to claims of Marcos apologists, the country fell into economic ruin. One indicator is the country's foreign debt, which grew at an unsustainable rate. And in 1965, on Marcos's first year of presidency, unang taon pa lang to, the country's external debt stood at $624 million, hindi peso, dollars. This amount grew more and more, grew more than 3 times to $1.912 billion by the time Marcos concluded his first term in 1969. This only worsened in the next 2 decades, so much that by 1980, the debt had ballooned to $17.252 billion. And by the time Marcos was deposed, we were left with a $28.25 billion debt, which according to Ibon Foundation, Filipino taxpayers will have to shoulder until 2025. That's next year. So nagbabayad pa rin tayo ng buwis hanggang ngayon, or nagbabayad pa rin tayo ng utang ng Pilipinas hanggang ngayon, actually hanggang sa susunod na taon. Hindi original yung peace sign. You can see in this photograph, no, yung peace sign ni BBM noong 2022. As a matter of fact, ginawa rin ng tatay niya yan when he was campaigning for the presidency. So it was not at all original. Justice Araneta had advocated and Cuaderno had feared, Marcos did spend at a deficit. No? Sinunod niya nga si Araneta, pero nasobrahan naman no deficit. Sumobra naman. He did so, however, to the point of a debt crisis in the 1970s through the 1980s. While Marcos pumped money into the economy to finance his projects, he did so extensively through foreign debt as well. Tapos, yung iba pang mga project, masyado pang magarbo, no? Kaya um, unnecessarily ostentatious yung mga project ni Marcos, no? So, alimbawa, yung PICC, yung pag-dump pa lang ng lupa sa Manila Bay, sobrang mahal na nun. Tapos gagawan mo pa ng building na dinesign ng national artist, it's even more expensive. So, may mga ganong projects si Marcos na hindi naman kailangan ganon kagarbo, pero ganon yung pinagawa nila anyway. Right? So, ito yung tinatawag na edifice complex ni Marcos. Ang dami niyang pinagawa. Actually, si Imelda, ang dami niyang pinagawa na mga buildings dito sa Pilipinas. Pero most of them were funded by foreign debt and not really by the government funds that we have. So he poured the billions of dollars worth of external borrowing and state funds onto his superfluous projects, including the unproductive ones. This may be seen in the case of what Ricardo Manapat referred to as designer hospitals in Diliman, Quezon City. Kung narinig niyo na yung tinatawag na Bopis Hospital o kaya Lamang Loob Hospital, no? Yun yung mga yon. Heart Center, Lung Center, Kidney Transplant Institute, and in Alabang, there's also a Research Institute for Tropical Medicine. So ito yung mga quote designer hospitals na pinagawa ni Marcos dito sa Metro Manila. Nandyan din yung Bataan Nuclear Power Plant. I think in-award niya sa isang crony yung paggawa ng power plant na ito. Of course, the Manila Bay Reclamation Projects, including the CCP, the Manila Film Center, the PICC, among others. Even more appalling is how Marcos squandered state funds to resuscitate the losing ventures of his cronies, yung mga paluging negosyo ng mga cronies ni Marcos. Bini-bail out niya by funding it using the money of the people. Yung kaba ng bayan yung ginagamit, no? Para lang isalba yung palugi ng negosyo ng kanyang mga cronies. One example is Cuenca and the CDCP. Manapat notes that Marcos, through different government institutions such as the Development Bank of the Philippines, Philippine National Bank, the GSIS, granted onto Cuenca CDCP a behest loan totaling $460 million, which at that time was 20% of the money in circulation in the Philippines. Biruin niyo yun. 1/5 of the money in circulation, pinahiram niya sa isang crony para lang maisalba yung CDCP ni Rodolfo Cuenca. The supposed golden years of the Philippine economy was in fact a fiasco. So, I'd like to share this slide with you to show you how Marcos did implement the vision of Araneta, but he did so perversely, right? So I'd like to call this slide Marcos's perversion of Araneta's vision. So Araneta, on the one hand, he campaigned for the deliberate devaluation of the peso. Marcos devalued it so much that it spiraled out of control. By 1986, by the time that his family left for Hawaii, People Power Revolution broke out, $1 back then is equal now to 20.39 pesos. Humina ng humina. This is not necessarily a bad thing if we are doing well in terms of exports. I'll get back to that point later. Second, Araneta also advocated target spending or pump priming. Yan yung term ni John Maynard Keynes, di ba? Yung term naman ni Roosevelt ay yung New Deal, Filipino New Deal yung term ni Araneta. It resulted into a debt crisis. Nasobrahan naman tuloy ng gasto si Marcos, di ba? Masyado namang magarbo, masyadong superfluous yung mga projects na pinagawa nila ni Imelda. And you can identify a lot of examples of those projects, no? Here in the Philippines, not just in Metro Manila, but in the rest of the country. And finally, there is also this export-led industrialization that Araneta was talking about, but then it led to crony capitalism. Ngayon, medyo mabigat na konsepto yung crony capitalism. So I'd like to leave you with a definition. Let me just stop sharing my screen. If you have the Merriam-Webster dictionary in your cell phones or gadgets, no, hanapin niyo yung term na crony capitalism. It's actually there. And it was Marcos and his dictatorship that introduced this concept to the world. It was just coined by a journalist, but it was Marcos and his regime that introduced this to the world's political and economic vocabulary. So, simply put, crony capitalism is an economic system in which individuals and businesses with political connections and influence are favored through tax breaks, grants, and other forms of government assistance in ways seen as suppressing open competition in a free market. So gumagawa ito ng mga monopolyo, no, sa mga produkto. At nakita natin yan kanina sa mga halimbawa na minention ko, katulad ni Benedicto, no, yung sa sugar at sa media, nandyan si Floyrendo, banana. You also have Enrile and then Linko Juanco when it comes to coconut. And then Vicini, I think, was the one who was appointed to oversee the tobacco industry in the Philippines. Oh, not to mention, San Miguel Beer. No? Kinanding ko Juanco binigay yun. And to me, working on the project, some are smarter than others. Perhaps the biggest realization was there were so many people that we glorify in our history that were also guilty of being complicit to the Marcos dictatorship. I'll give you one concrete example, Raul Roco. Diba? Para sa ating mga Bicolano, we're so proud of Raul Roco. He even ran for president in 2004. Sinuportahan natin siya all the way, and we're so proud that he's a Bicolano. He's actually an Atenean, katulad ko, Atenista. But hindi nababanggit masyado that Raul Roco was actually the counsel for San Miguel Corporation during that time, which was owned by a crony in Boss Danding Cojuangco. No? So may mga ganitong expose si Manapat na yung mga taong venerate natin in history, pinapakita niya, no, na guilty rin sila of being complicit to the Marcos crony capitalism, the Marcos cronyism. Nagkaroon lang ng redemption si Rocco noong 1987 nung tumakbo na siyang senador, if I'm not mistaken, nag-senate na siya after the EDSA People Power Revolution, right? So may mga ganitong kwento si Ricardo Manapat, kahit nga si Cory Aquino, no, hindi niya pinalampas dito sa expose na to. Sinasabi ni Rick doon sa last chapter ng libro na guilty rin si Cory, hindi niya nahabol. Diba? Hindi niya nahabol yung mga cronies, hindi niya nahabol yung mga Marcos. As a matter of fact, pinabalik niya pa ng Pilipinas in the interest or in the spirit of national reconciliation. So parang may ganun din si Rick na sentiment doon sa last chapter ng libro. And I think the most striking to me there was the fact that Cory was a relative of one of the Marcos cronies in Danding Cojuangco, di ba? So parang what I'm realizing here is that our country's politics and even economy is being run by a few families. So this is my lecture for this morning, and I'd be happy to entertain questions later on. And if I may wrap this up, let me just end by saying that this is to say very little of the magnitude of the plunder by Marcos. Wala pa akong sinasabi masyado sa plunder, no? Sinasabi ko lang kung paano niya in-execute yung vision ni Araneta. It did not it did not go well for the Marcos economy, the execution of Araneta's vision, but it did proliferate wealth into the hands of a few. But it also created poverty, extreme poverty for many Filipinos. And with that, I'd like to end my presentation. Maraming salamat sa inyong pakikinig. And if I may also promote our organization, kami ni Kervin at si Sir Marjun at yung iba pang kasama natin sa meeting ngayon. We're part of this organization called Saysay Bicol. So I invite everybody to follow us on Facebook via this QR code. Maraming salamat Dos mabalos po for your attention this morning.